Taylor. So I just want to just say thank you for everybody who is joining us. We're going to be, I want to mention a few things first about why I invited Taylor. First of all, I love her aesthetics. She has the most amazing videos. She has a background in art history, and a big thing was I love the fact that she's so much into scents and resins, and that is such a really important way to connect to our ancestors. So we're going to be talking about some of these things, and so I asked her, let's have a chat about this, Taylor, please. Yeah, that's why I just love her work. Flower Child Bruja, the Flower Child Bruja. So that's why I invited her. Taylor, you're up, honey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing this medicine with us. I mean, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. I'm super excited to be here. The book is, when you said it was jam-packed, it is jam-packed, like of just so much goodness, so many amazing rites. Wow. It's a gift. It's such a gift. It's such a beautiful offering. Like, oh my goodness. I can't wait for more people to get their hands on it and to just take it in. But, so should we jump into our questions?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. All right. So the first question is going to be just to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background as a curandera.
So, my background as a curandera, I have over 25 years of experience mentoring, teaching, doing limpias. Of course, my great-great-grandmother was, well, not of course, but my great-great-grandmother was a very well-known curandera. It was in our family, so I was like exposed to that. Like my family was from Chihuahua, so it got a little bit like, okay, we knew about like certain herbs and working with things, and we talked about stories. But for example, my grandmother became a nurse. She wasn't a curandera, like into healing, but so it became more Western. So I was exposed to it. And then, just incidentally, I met 4 mentors when I was in the Yucatan, and even though I was exposed to it, I met them and I trained with them. So it was with training, with field work, working with 4 principal mentors that were from Yucatan, and two of them men, Don Tomas, Don Fernando, they had lived in Yucatan all their life. They spoke Yucatec Mayan, they knew the traditions, and they were just really sweet. And they took me in, they did limpias with me, they taught me how to do it. And incidentally, at that time, I was actually in law school, and I was already working as an attorney, working with them. And this was like, you're curandera. I'm like, okay, but I don't know. I'm just doing this. And the universe just kept pushing me. And the 2 ladies that I worked with, the 2 mentors, they didn't like the term doña. They were like, call me by my first name. Barbara, Malina, and I honor and respect however people want to be, identified. And they worked with Yucatec Mayan traditions, but they also worked with Nahua traditions, which are generally associated with Central Mexican indigenous traditions. So my training as a curanda was very much versed in indigenous traditions, very strong. And I worked in the Yucatan, like the people there, they're really proud of their indigenous roots. It's like they're very proud that they speak different languages, their indigenous languages, and Tzotzil, Tetzal, like they're just, that they really have held on to those indigenous traditions more so than in a lot of places. And then I studied academically too, because while I was in that, I was like, I really want access to our codices, our records. I want to understand what the glyphs mean. I want it because I knew the things intuitively. I knew. When I looked at the artwork, I knew. But I was like, okay, well, let me study this even more. So I actually, when I got a master's, and I got a master's in religious studies, and I focused on Mesoamerican shamanism and curanderismo, and I really just delved deep in the codices. So that's it's my background is practicing academically. I just I just dove right into this, and I just walked away from that career and became this and just fully embraced it.
Beautiful. That's amazing. That's so spirit-led. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so in the book, Veneration Rites of Curanderismo, you discuss the importance of ancestral veneration rites to the ancient Mesoamerican indigenous people and different people who could be recognized as ancestors. So Can you tell us about these understandings and how these understandings of who can be an ancestor are helpful to us in the modern day?
So, it's really interesting because let me just like give a little context of this, right? This is when it really like turned on for me, like the light turned on. Um, One was when I was pitching this book to a few people. One of the ladies that I was speaking to, really nice lady, she said, I told her, because I was explaining to her, I was like, yeah, Mesoamerican Indigenous people, they had a much more expanded view of ancestors. Their mythologies, it was people who could be an ancestor were people that were leaders of a community, were leaders of like the cities, right? They were also vocational mentors, and of course family, of course blood family, extended family. It was much more expansive, and they honored them. I want to say honestly, like looking at these rites and how deep it was embedded in the culture and the traditions, like way back from the Olmec to moving forward to the Aztec and the Maya. It was ancestral veneration was just as important as deity, if not even more important. And even a lot of the mythologies, like they had one of Catlique, who was the mother of Huitzilopochtli. She was one of the deities, one of the main deities of the Mexica, aka the Aztec. And they identified in the mythology Catlique as an ancestor, but she's also known as an earth mother deity. So there was a lot of conflation of like ancestors as deities. It was like very much embedded. It was incredibly important, and it was honoring, it was respecting, and it was understanding that when we worked with ancestors, we worked with sacred essence energy, soul energy. And the reason why it was so important is because we were able to be infused with this soul essence energy. We honored them, they took care of us. It was this beautiful reciprocal relationship. So when I told her about this lady that I was pitching the book to, so she was like a little confused. So she's like, oh, so you're defining ancestors differently. And I kind of paused for a second. I was like, well, actually, that's how our ancestors practice. It's not different. So, and I haven't, even though I know these things, I know I studied like critical, like feminist studies and all these things. I knew of social constructions. I knew that, like, for example, that in the 40s, for example, like Rosie the Riveter, the image of the lady that has a strong arm in the 40s, they're encouraging women to like, no, get out of the house, like go and hold the fort, like go to the factories and work, because their husbands were fighting in war. And then in the 50s, you start changing like these long recipes of like 3-hour recipes, encouraging women to cook and whatnot, and the whole construction of the nuclear family, because that was a social construction. So in the term ancestors. And that is something that is really important, because the way it is, it's like, it's powerful for us because we have had 500 years of erased indigenous genealogies. When the Spaniards came, what happened is that they did enslave the indigenous people. We didn't make good slaves because we died. 90% of the population died from syphilis, from a lot of diseases. It was airborne diseases that killed us. But after that, they still kept us in different kinds of forced labor systems, repatriamiento, encomienda. So what ended up happening is that a lot of the peoples that weren't necessarily Spanish, they started erasing a lot of our indigenous genealogies. So we have 500 years of being systematic discrimination of being indigenous, looking indigenous, not looking indigenous enough, having indigenous blood. So this is important because when we start saying, you know what, okay, maybe I don't know exactly where my tribe was from in Mexico and Guatemala and different countries in Latin America, because it wasn't just Mexico. They did this throughout Latin America, and also in the Portuguese, they also came here when they colonized. They had certain systems too, right? Mm-hmm. So we've been disassociated from our genealogies, but at the same time, that can have us be rootless, not having an identity, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, who are our ancestors? When we start looking at how our ancestors practice, of like, we looked at people that were our heroines, that were our mentors, that were leaders, that were like, you know what, I claim, like, you're my ancestor, I'm gonna honor you, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna honor you, respect you with integrity, with love. And if we understand that ancestor is a social construction and how we practice it and do it, that could be very empowering for us, because we reclaim our identities. We reclaim who is part of our spiritual entourage. We reclaim it, and we do it with the understanding that this has been done. And you know, I've been talking to a lot of other people from different cultures, and people from Caribbean, African traditions are like, yeah, you know, when we looked at ancestors, it went beyond blood. It was extended family, it was leaders, and it was like, you just began thinking, like, where did this come from? Of like, it's only, you know,
like, yeah, shrinking it down so much. Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. There's so much richness in it, and I feel like, again, it's like very intuitive for a lot of us that we can feel like drawn to a certain artist, or drawn to, you talk about affinities, and oh my gosh, I'm getting chills all over, because everybody can relate to that affinity. And when you put it in the context of, you know, these are ancestral connections most times, those quiet, really deep, grounded connections that we feel to places and people and different things, different energies. It's wonderful just to hear it solidified and hear it put in a historical context, because again, I feel like we know it intuitively, but then just getting reminded, like, no, this is the way that we've always walked. This is the way that we've always viewed ancestors. So thank you. Just, I love it. I love it. It just gets my wheels turning so much. And it just really begs the question of how much is it that we have just forgotten, and we just need to remember. We just need to be reminded. And it's like, yeah, I know that's true. You know, that's that heart medicine.
Yes, it is incredibly liberating for us to be like, you know what? This is something to reclaim our histories too, and to claim our spiritual histories. And to know that that is just, that can help, not just if you're Latinx, Chicanx, like so many different peoples. Because this is not just, and I talk to a lot of people, and they start telling me like, oh, their histories. And they start looking into it, and it's not just confined to something, because so many things have been, you know, just like it's blurry. But then when we can start saying it from a heart space, and when we do it with love, respect, and integrity, that's where the magic is. That's where the love is.
Yeah. And spirituality is about our expansion, you know, so it makes sense that you know, the powers are trying to make it smaller, and we're like, no, it's actually supposed to be this expansive view of what that means, you know, to be an ancestor, to have ancestral connections. Okay, in the book, you discuss lots of types of veneration rites, ancestral veneration rites. What are some rites that you would recommend for people who are just starting to establish their connection with an ancestor? I know a lot of people feel like very sticky about just getting started.
So, you know, there can be different things. I'm going to just throw out some ideas. So, like for example, if someone does know, like for example, I know that my family came from Veracruz. So what I began researching the indigenous people there and asking questions. So if you know, and I began researching, because the thing with the internet now, we have so much access to so much just amazing, it can be so empowering, and we have access to so much information. So you kind of find out, you know, okay, well, what resonates with you? And sometimes our blood family does resonate. We know who our grandparents are, our great-grandparents, and if that works with you and that resonates with you, beautiful. Then you try to find out, what did they love? What were they into? Like, were they, you know, if they were into music, you put something of their music, what foods did they like, and you create an altar for that, right? But like maybe let's say you want to expand it also to include indigenous, our indigenous histories from that land where you're from. So you then, as I was alluding to, like you ask your family, where did they come from? Where did the families come from? And you look, we can find out what were the peoples that were indigenous to those lands. And now we can find out, like, okay, you know, what traditions, what were their music? Like there's so much access to so much information, right? So that's if you have some idea. Now, what if, for example, you don't, like somebody was adopted and they don't know who their parents are, because a lot of that information is sealed from folks who have been adopted. We can also, as you mentioned it, and I mentioned the book, affinities. You know, we can see, like, because a lot of what we like, our ancestors like too. There's a connection. There's like, when there's a passion, that passion stays throughout lives. That is something that it just transcends. So when we love, for example, I had a client that came and went to that loved salsa music. And I encouraged her. I said, honey, this is, because she felt stuck. She choreographes. She does like choreography for a lot of salsa music. I said, connect with your ancestors and invite them to dance with you, to dance through you, to teach you their moves, you know? And bam, she got like so inspired, and she got connected with her ancestors, right? Because it was that connection of like what we love, what our affinities. We start reaching out, we start looking for images, we start looking for, whether it's, I've also encouraged people to do it with food. You know, what's the food of a place that you feel strong to, and you start tuning into and seeing, what roots do I have there? What feels right to me there? And it's something that is done intuitively, and again, always with love, respect, and integrity. So that's like if you're starting out, whether we know who, you know, where our families came from, or if we want to connect to different indigenous peoples of the lands. There's also a lot of like, if you want to like research things like there's academia.edu that we can actually look at, like a lot of their archaeological, a lot of their anthropological, their artwork, their indigenous artwork, so we can connect with that. There's just so many researches and ways to do that. And because of the internet, a lot of things are a touch away, thank God, you know, thank goodness for that.
Yes. So you said academia.edu? Okay, beautiful.
And
awesome.
And they have
What's
a lot
that?
of like free articles there that if you find like a tribe, like you find like a state, you can see like what indigenous people were there. You can look for information about them. And there's just a lot of archaeologists, they post things there for free.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Good resource. Awesome. Okay. So what could be certain rites you would recommend for people who are looking to deepen their connection with their ancestors individually or even as a family?
So, as I was kind of mentioning, you know, like when you're starting to make that connection, one thing that I recommend too, when you're starting to make that connection, let me go back a little bit too, because I want to also mention too some of the beautiful work that you bring in too, is deepening it and starting it is offering ofrendas. And it's believed in a lot of Mesoamerican Indigenous traditions that our ancestors are comprised of sweet smells. The soul, it's the soul breath. All those things like have like they're conflations. It's like the breath, soul, the smoke. It's part of where our ancestors are. So we can make resins, we can offer incense, and I highly recommend, you know, Taylor Flower Child Bruja, that you like look at the amazing things that she does, because those can be amazing offerings for our ancestors to start and also continue deepening our connections. Because if we start doing that daily, making ofrendas, we start out with the presumption that, yeah, of course they're guiding us. And thank you for guiding us. Thank you for watching over me. Thank you. Thank you for always being with me. Thank you. So I recommend, you know, ask Taylor, you know, what scents, you know, she would recommend, because she's a artisan in that, artisan in scents and resins, and working also with flowers, because flowers were also very important to our ancestors, which is why I asked Taylor to be a part of this, because that's her craft, that's what she loves, and I love her for that. So so to deepen, and then to continue deepening that connection. You know, if you're a foodie like me, because I'm that's me. You know, like that's where my jam. I'm a foodie. I'm all about like my weekend is like, it revolves around like, what am I going to eat that weekend? What are we going to do? But what are we going to eat? Where are we going to eat that? You know. So, and that's my job. That's what I do. That's how I work with my ancestors too. I have a plate for them. You know, as a family, you know, if you have a family, your family is open to that, or individually too, you know, whatever feels right, whatever people are open to in your family as well. You know, as my family, it's like, we have an extra plate, and I get my feather and I fan, you know, I open the door, and I offer, as the door is open, the smoke, and I call in my ancestors, you know, here's the food, you know, here's this offering, here's this ofrenda, here's this love, and I call them in to come eat with us. Before anyone eats anything, the first offering is the smell, the aroma of the food.
Yes.
And then yeah, and then we have them there at the table, and we just begin talking about our day. We talking about like what we're interested in. We share. So that's food, and also as I was mentioning too, like dancing. You know, whether it's inviting your ancestors, if you like, and that's also too. It's like art, art and culture, art and culture, because that's something that's a lot of us like it connects us intuitively. When we can go on a space of art and work in culture, we are in a space of intuition. We are in the same realm of our ancestors, and when we can dance with them, and we can ask them to show us dances that we love. Is probably there's some connection with them, and if we feel comfortable, we can ask them to dance through us too, if we feel comfortable with that. That's deepening that connection, and deepening that connection. I have a little story that I have in Veneration Rites of Curanderismo about working with cacao and having cacao ceremonies and dancing. I had a client that did that too. I had their ancestor dance through them and open pathways for them. And there's also, of course, creating stories, poems, singing.
Mhm.
I sang a song for one of my ancestors too, and that's what I love to do too. I love, I'm not a singer, but I love to sing.
Yes. It's veneration. It's a prayer.
So, I sing a lot. I'll play my drum, I'll have my rattle, and I'll offer them. That's part of my ofrenda. It's like deepening that connection. And when I'm writing the song, or when I'm writing a poem or spoken word, I invite them to speak through me. And I know when I'm singing, when I know when I'm speaking, they're coming through me, and we're deepening our soul connections with one another. So that's just a really beautiful and expansive way, because we expand our soul energies with them, and we deepen our connection with our ancestors when we can really tune into things that are intuitive. And culture art is something that I feel is very intuitive for most of us, and,
Yeah.
and food.
Yes, yep. Those are the threads, like totally, completely. Wow, wow. So good, so beautiful. Let's see. So should we, because we're getting about close to 12:30, so closing remarks?
So I just want to just encourage folks that, like, let's keep in heart mind that recognizing and claiming our ancestors, it's a beautiful right and a beautiful privilege, because it's part of who we are and our identities. And don't let anyone take that from you. Like, let it start weaving those beautiful threads, those beautiful chords, those beautiful linings of our ancestors and part of who we are. Because yeah, it's a privilege, it's an honor, and it's something that allowing our hearts to be open to it rather than being scared of it, and being humble and sweet about it. So yes, that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you for this work. Thank you for the body of work that you've put out. This is a beautiful new petal onto your gorgeous flower or plant of work. And I just want to say thank you. I want to tell everybody the book is full of great anecdotes. It has case studies inside. It has like lots of rites and rituals you can do, and you can kind of pick and choose like what feels best to you, what's inspiring to you. I mean, this was totally inspiring to me to get it from the practitioner side that you possess and the scholarly angle that you come from. It's just such a very, very wonderful concoction and mix of medicine that you put forth. And again, like everyone, just take this medicine into your heart as soon as you can, and you won't regret it. It's so beautiful, and it's so generous of you to share so freely, and to be a teacher to so many of us who are on this path. It's just completely received from myself and so many of us. And just thank you for being a divine reflection. Thank you for making sure the medicine keeps going and the heart keeps beating really strong.
Thank you too, Taylor, for all the beautiful work you do with the flowers, with the
Thank
scents
you.
and the resins. Thank you so much. And yeah, please, please go check out flowertalkbruja.com, theflowertalkbruja.com. She makes she does amazing work with the resins, and definitely make recommendations as to that, and maybe he can hopefully guide you as to something that would be ideal and perfect for you. So yes.
Thank you so much. Peace.
All right, have a beautiful Friday. Bye.
You too. Have a good one, everyone. Peace. Thank you.
Bye.